So last year I started a Mythbusters series where I tackled popular theories and rumours surrounding the Resident Evil 2 remake. Well, with the Resident Evil 3 remake having just been released, I decided to bring that series back, this time tackling the myths in the latest entry in Capcom's survival horror series. In today's episode we will be testing just the one myth, and that involves the Nemesis himself. This series is built around questions and theories the community has, so if you want to put anything to the test then please let me know in the comments section or on my social media accounts, the links to which are in the description. Anyway, without further delay, let's get started. Now, unlike Mr. X in the Resident Evil 2 remake, the Nemesis is a far more predictable creature, popping up at certain points in the game. Your first few encounters with the Nemesis can be quite daunting, with the only real option being to haul ass. But what if you were tired of running and wanted to give the big guy a taste of his own medicine? So since receiving the game on Tuesday, I've been trying different ways to take the Nemesis down, and I'm here to share my findings with you all. Now please bear in mind that the encounter I chose to test this theory on was just after reactivating the power at the substation, and as you leave, the Nemesis bursts through the wall. Oh, and I've also limited myself to using just the pistol, as you can find tons of ammo for it early on in the game. Also, we won't actually be trying to kill the Nemesis, i.e. downing him until he produces a special chest, we just want to down him. If you wanted to kill him to get one of those chests, you could just use the findings here to work out the best method. Oh, and the game's difficulty was also set to standard. So my first port of call when attempting to teach the Nemesis a lesson wasn't actually the method you might have guessed. Throughout the game you are told that headshots are king, but I noticed something during my many battles with the Nemesis. On his chest he seems to have some sort of power pack that when shot produces a spark and leaks a purple fluid. Now if video games have taught me anything, it's that visual feedback like this means we are doing some damage. So for my first attempt I decided to focus purely on that part of his chest. Interestingly, the Nemesis will put his hand up to protect that part of his body. Again, I took this as a hint that I was on the right track. So I tried this method 3 or 4 times and was careful not to shoot after a successful dodge. More on that later. Shooting only the electronic thing on his chest, and yes, that is the technical term for it, we took the Nemesis down in 11 shots. It's worth noting that none of these shots were critical shots. As was the case with the RE2 remake, critical shots are largely RNG dependent. You'll know when you have performed one as the screen sort of flashes white. Now please bear in mind, this will only down the Nemesis for around 8 seconds or so. After that he will get straight back up and hunt you down again. It's up to you to decide if the wasted ammo and potentially wasted healing items are worth the break downing the Nemesis will grant you. Now let's try an even harder method, that being perform a successful dodge and immediately shoot straight after. Now luckily when we perform a successful dodge, the game will auto aim to a certain part of the Nemesis, that being either the head or the chest. If the auto aim does snap to the head, we can try to adjust the aim to the chest, but it can be quite tricky in the short window of time you're given. So I will only be shooting when the auto aim targets the chest, just to make sure we're definitely hitting the chest. If you guys are trying to down him in your own playthroughs, you obviously won't have these restrictions. Anyway, in the interest of video game science, we have to try it, so here goes. So this method is pretty tough. Even with a ton of practice, I still haven't perfected the dodge maneuver against a Nemesis. But after a couple of tries, I managed to down him using only shots taken after a successful dodge. Something which was made even harder by the fact that the auto aim kept snapping to the Nemesis's head. Anyway, it took a total of 9 bullets to down the Nemesis, meaning it was 2 shots quicker than the regular method of shooting the chest. I mean, it may be quicker, but it's also a lot trickier to pull off. Now it's time for perhaps an easier option. Headshots. Again, I was careful not to shoot directly after dodging. Now as you can see from the gameplay, this method seemed to yield more critical hits, which probably shouldn't be surprising. I found that shooting the Nemesis in his rather large teeth produced a pretty consistent amount of criticals. That and the back of his head seemed to be the best options. This way of taking the Nemesis down required 9 bullets, with 2 of those being critical hits, which for those paying attention is the same amount of shots it took to down the Nemesis using the dodge then shoot the chest method we covered earlier. Up next we have to dodge attacks from the Nemesis and then shoot him in the head. Now this method was very confusing. Take a look for yourselves. So it took a whopping 16 shots to down the Nemesis, and we didn't manage to score a single critical hit using this method. Now if I'm honest, this set of results has left me confused. I was certain that a perfectly executed dodge would give you a higher chance of a crit, but that doesn't seem to be true. What I have noticed though is that a perfectly executed dodge does make your gun fire faster, so perhaps they replace the critical attacks with a faster firing gun. Who knows? I will say though that the majority of these headshots were to the side of the Nemesis's head, mainly because that's where the auto aim snapped to. I tried for a couple of hours to land shots to his face after a dodge, but whenever I was face on, the auto aim targeted the chest and not the head. As I mentioned earlier, shots to the face and back of the head seem to be a more efficient way to score crits, but it still doesn't explain why this particular method seems so inefficient. Now the next weapon I thought I'd try is the combat knife. Now obviously it's not the ideal weapon to take the Nemesis down with, but if needs must, I thought I'd give it a go. Now as you'd expect, this method is probably the most time consuming, but it's also the one I found easiest. For some reason, when using the knife, I found performing a dodge much easier, and if you do perform a dodge, Jill will lunge in with her knife to stab the Nemesis, which looks really cool. In total, it took 7 perfect dodges and melee hits to bring down the Nemesis with the knife, far lower than I'd anticipated. This particular way of bringing the Nemesis to his knees is probably the most skill-intensive method in the video, but if you can time your dodges right, it's also the most efficient, in my opinion of course. To summarise, I feel like these findings leave me with more questions than answers. If I had to pick a preferred method, it would probably be straight up headshots, as the Nemesis doesn't attempt to block those, and you have a pretty high chance of hitting a crit, which can stun the Nemesis, giving you a chance to get out of his way. I'd love to hear the methods that you guys have been using to take the Nemesis down, and if you try any of these methods, then let me know how you get on. So that's it for today's video. As I said at the beginning of the video, this series is built off your suggestions, no matter how weird they may be. For example, last year I spent a few hours trying to shoot lickers in their bumholes, as apparently that was a one-shot kill. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. So don't be afraid to comment your theories down below and I'll be sure to check them out. Anyway, thank you all for watching and I'll speak to you all soon.